Welcome to the Belly Button Window channel and episode 18 part 1 of the Jimi Hendrix story, like you've never heard it before. In this episode, we deep dive into the early part of January 1968 and Jimi Hendrix's arrest in Gothenburg, Sweden. Please remember to check the channel's community tab and video information page, where you will find links to related videos, performances, and stunning photographs from the period. Also, you will probably notice that we are experimenting with producing shorter and more installments, mainly due to the amount of content associated with each new month. Please let us know what you think. Monday, the 1st of January, sees rehearsals at the Hillside Club. Also included an interview with the BBC at Broadcasting House, London. Tuesday, the 2nd of January, Klucksklick, the Railway Hotel, Hampstead. Jimi participates in a jam session with the band Al Sykes and John Mayall, with photos by Rob Bosboom. The Experience members obtain their visas at the Swedish Embassy in London for their upcoming trip. Hendrix writes a deposition, in which he attacks Capitol Records for the recent release of songs recorded before his fame, on the album Get That Feeling. And a further photo session at Jimi's flat in London. Wednesday, the 3rd of January, The Experience flies from London to Torslanda Airport, Gothenburg, Sweden, for a quick 4-date tour of Sweden and Denmark. They arrive around 5:40 p.m. at the Opelin Hotel, Gothenburg, where Jimi Hendrix occupies room 625. Thor Christiansen takes some photos, and Jimi is interviewed by Gösta Hansson for Göteborgs Tidningen, published January 4, 1968. Thursday, the 4th of January, LORENSBERG Circus, Gothenburg, performing 2 shows, 45 minutes each, starting at 7 and 9:30 p.m., with support acts, Mecky Mark Men and the Baby Grandmothers. The set list for the first show: Foxy Lady, The Wind Cries Mary, Fire, Hey Joe, Come On, Part 1, and Purple Haze. Set list for the second show: Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, Fire, Hey Joe, Foxy Lady, The Wind Cries Mary, and Catfish Blues. Later that evening, as was the routine when traveling on the road, the band went to Club Carl to explore the local music scene. They returned to the Opelin at about 2 a.m. with a group of close friends, and the party went on late into the night. Initially celebrating in MITCH'S room, but sometime later they decided to move the party to Jimi's room 625. And it's shortly thereafter that is when the commotion begins. The circumstances surrounding Jimi's arrest are not entirely clear, though we can be certain of one thing: excessive consumption of alcohol played a significant role. Police, however, imposed an immediate travel ban on Hendrix, detaining him for 2 weeks and ordering him to report to the police station every day at 2 p.m. until his court appearance on January 16, 1968. Nevertheless, Jimi Hendrix and the Experience were still allowed to perform their consecutive shows in Sandviken and Stockholm. After concerts in Copenhagen and Stockholm, Mitch and Noel went back to England whilst Jimi returned to Gothenburg, and on the 16th, he appeared in court. He was fined 3,200 Swedish crowns, equivalent to about £200 at the time. For Jimi, it must have seemed like life imitating art, or more accurately, his song Manic Depression in action. In the space of 48 hours, Hendrix goes from the elation associated with being named rock's greatest musician just 2 days earlier in the annual readers' polls of both Melody Maker and Disc, then going on an alcohol bender in Sweden, losing his temper, and which ended up with Jimi spending the night in jail. And most luckily. On another level, that evening highlighted the paradox of fame as the Faustian bargain, and at the same time the fragility of life. To be recognized as one of the greatest and yet, although out of character, exhibit behavior that demonstrated Jimi's human frailty. For someone of Jimi's immense talent and creatively given life through his mastery of the electric guitar, and then, out of sheer anger and frustration, to punch your fist into plate glass, is extraordinary, both in its recklessness and pure luck that more serious damage was not sustained. By January of 1968, relations between Jimi, Noel and Mitch had been deteriorating somewhat, and all 3 of the guys were totally exhausted by almost 12 continuous months of solid touring. To cap it all, Hendrix was in the middle of a frustrating legal battle with Capitol Records, owing to Ed Chalpin releasing some of his early Hendrix recordings as a session guitarist, making out as if they were a bona fide Jimi Hendrix albums. To Jimi, making music was everything. He was such a perfectionist that he often spoke somewhat disparagingly about his own music, owing to the rushed and rigid recording timeframes imposed upon him. Then to see what can only be called very low-quality recordings, being unscrupulously marketed as contemporary. Let's not forget the financial impact. As a consequence of the various lawsuits in both the US and UK, the payment of royalties had been frozen pending a legal outcome. Also, despite his reputation as a wild man, Hendrix in fact had an unusually low tolerance for alcohol. Those around him that day in Gothenburg say he began drinking early at the Opalen Hotel in a deliberate attempt to get seriously drunk. One further note of interest: Scandinavia has always been known as extremely difficult to score drugs, which meant either beer or schnapps. Chances are, had Jimi had access to the full range of mood enhancers, the outcome could have been entirely different. Noel Redding, in his autobiography, had a slightly different narrative. After the show, we went off to do the club round. Jimi didn't usually come drinking with us seasoned English drinkers, as he couldn't handle booze very well, but in Scandinavia it was booze or nothing. That night we all got rotten drunk. They returned to the hotel from the Club Carl around 2 a.m., at which point Jimi began drumming loudly in his room. Noel goes on to say that Jimi had been hanging out with this gay Swedish journalist. Perhaps he was putting ideas in Jimi's head, but Hendrix suggested we have a foursome. The Swede was really pushing it, and the vibes got stronger and stranger. The tension built up until Jimi started dashing about smashing everything in his room. It was terrifying to see, and very sobering. It would appear, according to this scenario, Noel and Mitch's unwillingness to participate had enraged Jimi, who began smashing up the room. Hotel residents claimed to hear screaming, plus the sound of glass and furniture being smashed, as Hendrix's anger erupted into a fight with Redding and Mitchell. According to Mitch, the fight continued out into the hotel corridor. "I think I threw a very feeble punch at him," he recalled, which amazed Hendrix more than anything else. Eventually, with the aid of roadie, Jerry Stickles, Hendrix was subdued by Stickles, Redding and Mitchell, all sitting on top of him. Of course, the noise would have been heard all over the hotel, and it was sometime around 4 a.m. when the receptionist, Per Magnusson, received a complaint in relation to room 625. Upon entering the room with a master key, and according to the police statement, he found Hendrix lying on the bed, his right hand bleeding profusely after having been smashed through the window. There was virtually not a stick of furniture left intact. Magnusson set a commissionaire to stand guard on the door while he went to summon the police. Bill Åström is a Swedish musician and record producer for such acts as Hansen and Karlsson, and was with Hendrix that evening, and this what he had to say about the incident at the Opalen Hotel. "When I entered the room, the mood was kind of agitated. So instead of facing that, I somewhat cowardly slipped into the bathroom. I was thinking, let them cool down a bit. I wanted some time to think of how to handle the situation. And so instead of backing out, I sneaked in behind the bathroom door and heard everything as it started to happen. Everybody was trying to leave the room and not really loud. I just heard him, Jimi that is, smash a window out of frustration with the whole situation. Everyone was expecting to hang out and have fun, but he wasn't in the mood for it. It's strange how it was reported as a totally damaged room, the carpet, TV and everything. As I remember it, there was only Jimi and me in the room when I opened the door, and I found my Afghanistan fur coat on the window pane with blood on it. That's how I remember Jimi was hurt. We just took a towel or pillowcase, wrapped it around his hand to stop the bleeding before he went to the hospital. I remember we walked calmly down the stairs to the front desk of the hotel. Everyone tried to make it worse, and his wound didn't even stop him from playing, nor did he even complain about it. Make of that what you will. However, researchers have confirmed that there was no TV set in room 625. The telephone was not damaged, but clearly a large amount of blood had stained the carpet such that it needed to be cleaned or replaced. But most emphatically, Hendrix did not quietly walk down the stairs. The police statement confirms additional officers were requested to subdue Hendrix and cuff him before being escorted to the waiting police car and held in a cell overnight at local police station. He was charged with criminal damage, then taken to the hospital for treatment, where he received stitches to his right hand. Subsequently, his hand was bandaged for the next few days, as shown in concerts images. The hotel made no claim for damages, as Chandler paid out more than 8,000 crowns, around £500, for the damage. Things could have been much worse, were it not that Chaz was almost an adopted son of Sweden. given his Swedish wife and well-connected Swedish father-in-law. The police banned Jimi from traveling and leaving Sweden, ordering him to report to the police station every day at 2 p.m. until his court appearance, which was scheduled for January 16, 1968. According to Chandler, "I asked him, Jimi, what happened, but he didn't know himself, and I never really got the full story. But I think Noel hit Jimi, and Jimi laid out 2 cops and tried to jump out of the window." 2 more police were summoned, and Hendrix was finally arrested at about 6 a.m. by 4 officers, then taken to hospital to have his wound attended to. Clearly, if one looks at the trajectory of Jimi's career, this incident should have been a wake-up call to management, and those close to him. That aura and adulation which accompany fame bring with it all sorts of stresses, which could only have been exacerbated by physical exhaustion and fatigue. The ordeal eventually cropped up as the subject matter of his song, My Friend, where he sang, "Well, I just got out of a Scandinavian jail, and I'm on my way straight home to you." That concludes this installment of the series. Stay tuned for the next installment, where we will continue the deep dive into January 1968 of the Hendrix story, including the Scandinavian, French and US gigs, recording for the Electric Ladyland LP, and much, much more. Don't forget to subscribe for future content updates. And by the way, if you have any stories or anecdotes to contribute, we would love to hear from you. Finally, thank you so much for your wonderful comments and continuing support. Remember, there's much more of the story yet to be told.